Freckles, I got so many answers to that question, I wouldn't even know where to start.
Hello Lost fans, it is me, Seanie B, and today I'm going to cover everything that happened in the 13th episode of Season 6 of Lost called The Last Recruit. Now I usually talk about the titles at the beginning of these recaps, but for this episode, I'm going to be talking about it at the very end. Okay, now it's time to hand out the Fast Reflex Awards.
And boom goes the dynamite.
Congrats to the 10 people down here. You guys were the 10 fastest last week, so good job. Also, I wanted to cover a mistake I made in the last recap. I said that this episode would be Jack-centric Flash Sideways, whereas this Flash Sideways in this episode didn't cover anyone in particular. Also, this episode didn't have many secrets and only just a few key things to go over, so this episode recap isn't going to be super long. It probably will be the shortest one that I've made this season, but I'll still go over everything that happened throughout this episode. And like usual, I'm just going to break this recap up into two parts. The first part being everything that happened in the Flash Sideways, and the second part being everything that happened on the island with the original timeline. So here we go. Like I was saying, this episode didn't have just one specific character-centric Flash Sideways, but instead tied a bunch of the past Flash Sideways stories together. We left off last episode with Desmond hitting Locke with his car, so this episode, we start off with Locke being rushed to the hospital, and once he gets there, Sun arrives at the exact same time from being shot a few episodes ago by Kimi. But when she looks over and sees Locke, she panics and says to Jin in Korean, "It's him, it's him." Sun was panicking when she was saying this, when she was saying, it's him. But the question here is, why? In the Flash Sideways, she never even met Locke. I mean, they were on the same plane, but they probably didn't recognize each other, so why was she panicking when she was saying that? The answer is that she was having a near-death experience, and we know from Desmond and Charlie in the past episodes that when you have a near-death experience, you have these flashes from the original timeline, so when she saw Locke there lying there, she thought he was Flock / the Man in Black from that timeline. It's also interesting too, the EMT says that Locke's wheelchair was smashed into pieces, but we can clearly see after Locke was hit by Desmond last episode, the wheelchair looks just fine. We next go to the police station where Sawyer talks to Kate about the coincidence of them seeing each other again after they just saw each other in the airport. Kate's pretty savvy though, and she figures out that Sawyer didn't arrest her because he probably didn't want anyone to know that he was in Australia. So she blackmails him, implying she'll tell the feds if he doesn't help her. Miles comes over and tells Sawyer about the Kimi situation and that they think that they have a lead on the killer, a surveillance tape of Saeed. Next we go to Claire, who goes to the adoption agency. Now Desmond just happens to be strolling by and tells Claire that adoption is a complicated process and that she should come with him to see his lawyer. Stalker much? She agrees, after hearing it's free of course, and they visit his lawyer, Ilana Verdansky. It's interesting too, in the Flash Sideways, Ilana doesn't have a Russian accent like in the original timeline, but she has an American accent instead. Also, Ilana's law firm is called Sweetser and Verdansky. Sweetser is the name of the street Penny told Desmond to meet her at for coffee. When Desmond introduces Claire to Ilana as Claire Littleton, Ilana's like, "Wait, are you from Australia?" Claire says yeah, and Ilana claims that they've been looking for her. Okay, now Saeed. He goes to Nadia's house to get some things to leave when Miles knocks on the door looking for him. Saeed sneaks out the back door when Sawyer pulls the hose, causing him to faceplant worse than this kid. And then Sawyer arrests the noob. Who knew it was a simple garden hose that could stop Saeed, unlike guns and bad guys. After this, we go to Jack with his son David as they visit the lawyer to hear Christian's will. The lawyer, who happens to also be Ilana, shows Jack Claire, and Jack finds out that Claire is his half-sister. He's speechless, but then he gets an emergency call from the hospital. So he goes there and notices that the patient he's working on's dural sac is obliterated. Once he starts the operation, he sees Locke's reflection in the mirror, and he's startled, telling the nurse, "I think I know this guy." It's obvious from what Desmond said a couple episodes ago to Minkowski that he's trying to push people to remember the original timeline events. So he runs over Locke to give him that near-death experience and to be reunited with Jack, and then also he brings Claire to Jack. And like I said a couple recaps ago, it seems like he's trying to have all the survivors return to one timeline by merging both timelines. We know most of the main characters in Lost are named after really famous people and that their meanings are significant. Like Desmond, for instance, he's named after the philosopher David Hume. I mean, even in the show, Desmond's middle name is David. Now, the philosopher David Hume claimed that The self is nothing but a bundle of interconnected perceptions linked by the relations of similarity and causality. Almost exactly similar to what Desmond Hume in Lost is trying to get his oceanic friends to realize. I mean, there was a reason he was given his name after all. So then what is Desmond becoming? Well, like I said in some past recaps, I think there's a higher power on the island than both Jacob and the Man in Black, maybe represented by the mysterious boy. Now what if this is who Desmond is becoming, like the Observer? Alright, now let's talk about everything that happened on the island. We start off right where we left off last episode. Locke smiles at stunned Jack and wants to catch up with him. So they talk about different issues, and at the very end, Flock confirms to Jack that he was disguising as Christian Shepherd on the island. I know I was thinking this at the beginning of the season, that Christian was the Man in Black on the island, but it just doesn't make sense the more and more I'm thinking about it, that every time we've seen Christian on the island, it has been the Man in Black. So what if there's two Christians? It could be that every time we've seen the Christian with the suit and the white shoes, the outfit Christian was buried in, it has been the Man in Black. Then the other Christian would be the spirit of Christian, dead on the island and can't move on, like Michael and the others, wearing casual clothes. As Michael said last episode, the whispers are from spirits who can't move on, so this would explain the whispers happening right before Christian appears to Michael in the freighter when he says, "You can go now," and then the freighter explodes. And this would also explain the whispers happening right before Sun and Frank see Christian at the barracks. Locke also says that he became Christian only to help Jack leave the island, but also claims that he can't because Jacob told him. He also says that John Locke was not a believer but a sucker, which contradicts what Ben said at Locke's funeral, that he was a believer. They go back to the camp, and right when Locke comments about how nice it is to have everyone together, Zoe emerges and asks for Desmond back. Flock denies knowing what she's talking about, so she demonstrates Widmore's power by having an artillery shell pass right by them. She gives the walkie-talkie to Flock and tells him that he has until nightfall to return Desmond, giving the Man in Black a deadline like he gave the Temple Dwellers a deadline in sundown. And once she leaves, the rebel smashes the radio with his Moses staff and says, "Here we go." He then tells his group that they've all been provoked and that they need to head to Hydra Island. He gives Sawyer a map of where a boat is, asking him to bring it to their rendezvous point. When Flock calls over Sayid to talk with him in private, Sawyer whispers to Jack that he and Kate aren't going to do what Locke wants them to, but that they have a deal with Widmore to leave the island, and that Jack should find a way to escape and meet them at the docks, that is, with Sun, Hurley, and Frank as well. But Sawyer doesn't want Dark Side Sayid and Crazy Claire to join them. It turns out that when Locke was talking to Sayid, he was telling him to kill Desmond in the well, so he goes there and points his gun at the carefree Desmond. Desmond asks what Flock offered to kill him, and Sayid says that he would be with the woman he loved again, even though she's dead. Desmond calmly asks Sayid what he will tell this woman that he loves when she asks what he had to do to be with her again.